I want to bring in now the former head of ASIO, the former head of the Department of Foreign Affairs, and former ambassador to the United States himself, Dennis Richardson. Dennis Richardson, thanks for your time. First of all, can I get your overall view on the outcome of the long-awaited Trump-Albanese meeting?
Well, I think it's essentially all been said, Kieran. It was a great outcome in terms of the Prime Minister. It was a great outcome in terms of Australia. I didn't think it was altogether surprising. I don't think the US was ever shaping up to have a brawl in the context of this meeting. I think the critical minerals agreement had been well foreshadowed. What President Trump said on August was welcome, but I don't think altogether surprising. There's obviously a lot of detail to go in terms of the critical minerals agreement, also a lot of hard work in terms of the nuclear-powered submarines. But in terms of this milestone, it was a big tick.
Well, particularly in the context of other leaders going into the White House and not necessarily having a smooth engagement, having a pushback from the president on substantive issues, like if you think of the Japanese, an ally of the US, it's happened. Other allies have copped similar sort of treatment. We've gone in, and on every substantive front, it's a tick of approval.
Well,
if you're ambassador, you'd be delighted, wouldn't you?
Well, yes, but also reflects the hard work put in by the government. A meeting like this doesn't go this well by accident. Yes, there was always President Trump's unpredictability, but the outcome of this meeting reflects enormously well on the work the government had put in, the work the embassy had put in, and the work that Ambassador Rudd had put in. I note that some people call for Kevin Rudd's resignation or sacking as a result of some comments made by President Trump. But you can't just look at those comments in isolation without acknowledging that the outcomes here are very much a result of the work put in by the ambassador.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll ask you again about that a bit later, but in terms of the US-Australia relationship, and you know it better than anyone, there are the issues around tariffs, a little niggle here and there, but overall the language, the sentiment from Donald Trump, both in terms of the major policy pieces, but his view towards Australia. And even when I've covered prime ministerial meetings with Donald Trump in his first iteration as president, right through to now, he's always had a positive sentiment towards our nation.
And I think that reflects a generally positive sentiment towards this country across the United States. Look at the overall relationship. It's marked by, a lot of people talk about, they just focus on the trade, merchandise trade. The economic relationship in overall terms between Australia and the US is probably bigger than our economic relationship with China. Our merchandise trade with China is way, way bigger than our merchandise trade with the United States. However, you look at the financial flows, you look at how important the United States is in terms of our debt borrowings. You look at two-way investment. The US is by far the largest foreign investor in Australia. We're one of the largest investors in the United States. You look at the cultural and educational two-way movement. At any one point in Australia, in the United States, you have well over 100,000 Australians living and working and studying in the US. It's a very broad and very deep relationship.
I remember going and seeing you when you were ambassador with then Prime Minister Howard and Prime Minister Rudd, and at the time, different political stripes, but meeting George W. Bush at the time. This time you've got a Labor leader meeting Donald Trump, America First, and his America First style Republicans. How, from your experience, how important is it, that personal rapport between the two leaders? Because next week the Prime Minister might be meeting Donald Trump again a couple of times at ASEAN and APEC. So it might be a flurry of engagements very quickly.
One, it is important. Secondly, This is not a relationship that has ever been allowed by either side to be held hostage to one person's personality. Different leaders engage differently. President Bush, he very much looked for emotional connections. His famous line after he met President Putin, "I looked into his eyes and saw his soul." President Obama looked for an intellectual connection rather than an emotional connection. President Trump, I don't know, but he's clearly someone who can put aside sharp differences in terms of a broader interest.
Yeah, indeed. And on the issue of Kevin Rudd and the comments made, because it was the one awkward moment in that meeting where he said, I probably won't like you and I never will. But then subsequently, as the cameras were leaving, I'm advised that, and as Andrew's reported as well, the president said, all's forgiven. Kevin Rudd said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, and he reiterated that. Kevin and Mr. Trump said, all is forgiven. Does that, in your mind, I know you didn't think it was that big an issue and you haven't thought it's a big issue for months and months, but in a way, does it also now just clear the air once and for all?
Oh, yes. I mean, if anyone felt the air needed to be cleared, then it's been cleared. In point of fact, from all accounts, including his former detractors, Ambassador Rudd has been doing an outstanding job in Washington. The outcome of this visit owes an enormous amount to Prime Minister Albanese. It owes an enormous lot to Penny Wong and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and overwhelmingly to Ambassador Rudd. He has worked like one thing on this. The critical minerals agreement, everyone knows he's put his heart and soul into that. So I think to focus in on a few throwaway comments by President Trump is simply, I think it's a bit tacky.
Okay. And it's missing the substantive gains that have been made.
It's missing, absolutely.
Can I ask you finally, before I let you go, I did touch on the fact that the President mentioned in his overall news conference with Prime Minister Albanese, we're going to run that incidentally for our viewers at 12:30 in full, but he's heading to Malaysia and to Korea. Both leaders will be there. Do you think now that they've had this one engagement, from your experience, does that then open up maybe one or two other, a flurry of other engagement, maybe if they've now connected via having each other's phones or that sort of personal connection?
Well, they'll certainly have an exchange, but having had this substantive meeting in Washington, probably neither of them would see the need for another substantive meeting so soon. However, they'll certainly catch up with one another, and they clearly like one another. Yep. All's good that ends well.
Yeah, indeed. The former ambassador to the United States, Dennis Richardson, thank you for your time and your insights as always.
Pleasure, Kieran.